My guest is Phil Washington, the CEO for the Los Angeles Metropolitan Transportation Authority, known as LA Metro. Phil, thank you for spending a moment with GLA today. Given all the challenges that we had in 2020 and all that we've gone through like no other year in the past, Phil, what opportunities you see coming ahead? What is the silver lining for our industry looking forward?
Well, first of all, it has been a tough year. 2020 for this industry in the country, this is probably the toughest year in the history of public transit. And that is sort of a global impact on transit. I don't think there has been a global impact on transit like this one. And so I say global because it's not just impacting the transit agencies and the transportation industry, not just transit, but the transportation industry in the country globally, like the pandemic. But having said that, and looking back at these challenges, there are a number of opportunities. I do believe on the capital side, we are looking at acceleration of projects because of the lack of whether it's traffic, the lack of other work in areas. And so I think that we at LA Metro have been able to actually accelerate some of the projects because of that lack of traffic, car traffic, and people out. Now, at the same time, our sales tax revenue, the lack of presents a challenge on that capital side. I think the other challenge that leads to an opportunity is for us to rethink our service on the street. There's a running sort of disagreement in terms of philosophy when it comes to operators. Some operators say that just put all of your service out there, even though the ridership is not there, put 100% of your service out there and the riders will somehow come, versus putting ridership out commensurate with your on-street reality in terms of how many riders you have out. And so I'm of the school of planning your service according to on-street realities. I think you save money that way versus just putting 100% of your service out when the ridership is not there. So I think that there's some opportunities to rethink the way we look at operations on the street. And everyone won't agree with, my philosophy of being financially prudent with service that you put out. But I think professionals in this industry will be able to really study the impacts of COVID and create opportunities coming out of it.
Phil, for as long as I've known you, you've been an advocate and a champion for partnering. Why are you making this investment? What's in it for LA Metro and maybe for the industry as a whole, especially with what we're going through?
Well, I think I am a big advocate for partnering. I don't see how an authority or an agency or the private sector contractors, I don't see how we can manage large or even small or even medium-sized capital programs without partnering. I don't see how you can do it without partnering. I think at some point you have to get together, whether it's monthly or quarterly, and you have to have discussions on how the various projects are going. You have to have discussions and be able to resolve conflicts between contractors, between the owner. Now, I'm an advocate even of partnering with the various communities or local entities, like in this case, the city of Los Angeles and others. So it's not just between the client, being the government agency, and the contractor, but I think that partnering should be extended to the local cities so you can work out these issues. I think one of the things we have to get better as we implement all of these great projects and manage all these great projects is bringing these projects in on time and on budget. Now, we are about to, at the federal level, approve, hopefully, and pass Congress a massive infrastructure bill. I mean, this infrastructure bill is going to be in the $1.5 to $2 trillion range. And right now, we do not have the trust, I think, in many areas and in many cases, we don't have the trust of elected officials and the public to finish these projects on time, on budget. It's the best interests of both the government owner and the contractor to finish these projects and develop a level of trust with the public. And I think, and elected officials, that we can do this. And I think one of the ways to do that is a robust and a real partnering process where we sit down and talk through these issues.
You recently led the transportation transition team with the Biden administration. What lessons have you learned, Phil, and you can share at least with other transportation officials, whether in California or the nation for that matter, to look forward to, or maybe things that we can do different or better?
Well, thanks for the question, Sam. Yes, I was asked to lead the agency review team or the transition team for the United States Department of Transportation. Was honored to lead that team, a great team of some of the greatest minds in infrastructure in this country. We had a team of 21 individuals. We had subject matter experts in each modal agency, so FTA, FHWA, FAA. First of all, we evaluated and assessed USDOT, all of those modal agencies. We also were tasked with preparing the day-to-day leadership, the permanent leadership, to hit the ground running, specifically in their first 100 days. And we also were tasked with making sure that the nominee, now the secretary, was ready to hit the ground running and prepared to successfully get through his Senate confirmation. I'm happy to say we did all of those things, and Secretary Buttigieg got through his Senate confirmation with flying colors, and I was happy to hear he really acknowledged the agency review team for helping him do that. Now, you know, in terms of lessons learned from the experience, one big one on my list is there is so much to do. There is so much to do as we did interviews with external and internal stakeholders, as we did interviews with the tribal nations, as we did interviews with equity groups, as we did interviews with transportation organizations all over this country, whether it was Amtrak, whether it was commuter rail folks, whether it was bus folks. We have so much to do in infrastructure. And infrastructure, in my mind, is not limited to the U.S. Department of Transportation. So we need a coordinative effort across the various the federal departments to make sure that infrastructure is coordinated. I mean, USDOT does not handle, they're not responsible for broadband, bringing broadband. That's infrastructure. They're not responsible for removing lead in drinking water pipes, primarily in communities of color. That's infrastructure. We need a coordinative effort across federal departments to make infrastructure happen for low-income communities. And so the big lesson learned from my experience is, how do we do that? Right now, I do not believe the federal government is set up to do that. Now, one of the campaign pledges in Build Back Better is 40% of infrastructure dollars to low-income communities. How do we do that? Right now, award and grant criteria is not built to get that money to those low-income communities. So how do we do that? We have to change the criteria in some of the grant programs first. And so structurally, we have to be prepared to implement the pledges and the campaign promises that our president put forth. And I want to see us get structured in such a way that we can do that.
In this infrastructure investment that you alluded to, Phil, and all those campaign pledges and promises, it takes leadership. It takes people that need to start looking at doing things differently. And just because it wasn't done that way the last year or the last 5 or 10 years, it doesn't mean that it cannot be done in a different way. What's your thought about breeding new leadership? I'm sure you were coached and mentored through your career by other people. What message do you have for other industry leaders and transportation officials and leaders to coach and mentor other leaders to come behind us?
Well, the first thing I would say, and I often talk about this. The first thing we have to understand is that leadership is a dangerous thing. It's dangerous. I mean, so the challenge is for us to make tough decisions and survive those tough decisions in order to make change or to institutionalize change. That's the first thing. I mean, these leadership jobs around our country, whether it's infrastructure or whatever, are very tenuous positions. A friend of mine at Harvard, Marty Linsky, talks about the art of leadership is disappointing people at a rate that they can absorb. And because if you disappoint people at a rate that they cannot absorb, then you're out of there. And so the question becomes, how do we get what we need to accomplish as a leader? How do we do that and survive and survive? And so I think that we have to be bold. We have to have thick skin because people are going to come after you. And these are people that may not even know what the heck they're talking about, or they don't know the intricacies of the decision and of the subject matter that you're talking about. And so, can we survive that? And do we have tough enough skin to survive that? I think the other piece of this, involving leadership, is I liken leaders, especially new leaders to an organization. I liken this to us being a foreign substance being injected into a living organism. When you talk about walking in as a new leader into an organization. Now, if I, as a new leader, am a foreign substance being injected into a living organism, then either I am going to change with the living organism, or I'm going to change the living organism being the organization. One of two things is going to happen. I am going to change that organization, or it's going to change me. And so I think that as leaders, in order for us to make a difference in the organization, we have to lay out our vision for the organization. We have to lay out the expectations for the organization. We have to lay out what the organization can expect from the leader. And then we have to be tough enough, fair enough, and be able to endure long enough to institutionalize those changes. And so that is what I would offer to these new leaders. And the last thing is understanding that we're here to serve. We are to serve. We're not here for our self-grandization. We're not here to pad our stats, if you will. We're here to serve the public, and sometimes that means taking a back seat to our own personal interests.
What's going to be your legacy, Phil, for LA Metro? Now that you've been with the organization, you've had an impact, what are you going to be remembered by?
Well, that's probably a better question for the employees, or it's a better question for people that have been observing the agency. I would like to be remembered for my fairness. I would like to be remembered for my even-handed approach with regard to employees. I like to be known for, really putting in place Measure M, which is the largest infrastructure investment program in this country, having a part in that, in the leadership of that. I'd like to be a part or remembered for implementing innovation. And so a lot of people talk about innovation, but they don't implement it. It's very different. You can talk about innovation and not implement it. We have implemented it with nearly 30 or 40 different initiatives just here at Metro. I want to be known for really pushing forward with employee professional development, whether that is our Women and Girls Council, whether that is the Sea Transportation School, whether that is our leadership academies, whether that is our Eno Max program, whether that is partnering. And that is a form of professional development as well, because people that sit in there understand how to interact with contractors in partnering sessions. So I'd like to be known for those things, and also being known for just getting things done. And I don't want to be known for talking about getting things done. I want to be known for actually getting things done in an equitable fashion and looking at equity as sort of the principle for getting those things done.